Okay, the draft is over. The draft is one of my favorite times of year. I have loved the NFL draft since I was 10 years old, watching Rick Meyer get drafted by the Seattle Seahawks. It is a weird event that we get super excited for. It's just a list of names read. And yet, outside of maybe the first weekend of the NCAA tournament or some baseball events, it might be my favorite thing. It's really weird, but I've loved it for a long time. It's the prospect writer in me. I can't help it. We're going to talk about the Seahawks draft. If anybody's questioning my credentials, and this is imposter syndrome for me, I've covered college football for a long time, covered the NFL draft for a long time. It's been behind the scenes, but I am confident in saying I know what I'm talking about. I'm not I'm not as good as Todd McShay. I'm not as good as Joel Klatt. I'm not as good as Mel Kiper Jr. I'm not as good as any of those guys, but I feel qualified enough to talk about why I love the Seattle Seahawks draft. And I know I'm not alone. It's getting rave reviews from a bunch of places, but I love this draft. There's one pick that kind of irked me. We'll get to it in a second. But real quick, I want to thank Simply Seattle, the very best in Seattle sports gear. Use code MOLLYWOP15 to save 15% off your order. MOLLYWHOP15. Automatically takes 15% off your order at checkout. www.simplyseattle.com. And that code again, MOLLYWHOP15. All right. So let's start at the top. I thought the Seahawks had to end the draft with one of three players for me to love it. One of those players was Tyler Booker, the guard out of Alabama. And I know Booker wasn't a scheme fit with what Kubiak does. I just thought the talent was so immense that you had to consider him, or not just consider him, had to draft him if he somehow fell to 19. Now he doesn't. He falls to 12. I'll tell you who the other player is in a little bit. But the third player was Gray Zabel, and they got him, and it's a wonderful pick. What I love about Zabel, and look, did I watch every game of Zabel? No. Did I watch about 3 hours of video? Yep, because I'm an insane person. He's a tough guy, but he's not a dirty guy. You need that tough guy in the middle, and the versatility is great. Let's be honest, though. He's here to play guard. My guess is he's here to play left guard, but he'll compete for both spots. But that versatility is nice. And you can't help noting with his quickness, with his punch off the ball, how good he would be at center if they were to give that a shot. It doesn't sound like that's what they're going to do, but hey, that's a nice fallback. That's not to say center's so less important than what the other positions are, but I get it. You want to try him at guard first. And, in an emergency, you could play him at right tackle. I don't think he'd put him at left. The arms don't exactly have the length, although you just saw Will Campbell have T-Rex arms. No, but they definitely had some concern there. So much concern he went fourth overall. I think Gray Zabel is such a massive upgrade. And let's be honest, upgrade is darning with faint praise a little bit because this offensive line stinks. But you take a look at Zabel, he tested well, and you can tell me all you want about testing, it matters. And it's one of the reasons why I think Tyler Booker was a little scary, because his stats, and the most importantly, the shuttle times, not so great. But Zabel tested well. The one concern being, how's he going to handle playing against better competition after coming from North Dakota State? Senior Bowl matters too. And he looked awfully good in that area. So I would guess that Gray Zabel is an immediate starter. And I think he has a chance to be, I know the term Pro Bowl is silly, a perennial Pro Bowl, perennial Pro Bowler at his best. We'll see. There's a long way to go. But I do believe that Gray Zabel was excellent value at pick 19. And Seahawk fans should be thrilled to have him. And they should be thrilled to have the guy they got at 35 as well. So remember how I said, and sorry for the weird pause there, I have to pull up my notes for every single player. There's a couple I don't have a whole heck of a lot of notes on, just to be clear. But remember I said that the Seahawks had to end the draft with one of those three on day one? it was Zabel, it was Tyler Booker, and then the third guy was Nick Emmanwori. And I am just I smile thinking about how excited I am that they were able to get him at 35. Maybe my favorite trade in process, we'll see in result, is moving that second and third to move up for him, because I know Kobe Bryant did a solid job at safety. I don't think the Seahawks safeties are quite good enough to be the defense they need to be to compete for championships. Julian Love is a nice player. Kobe Bryant is a nice player. Nick Emmanwori has a chance to be a lot more than a nice player. I mean, you are talking about the Cam Chancellor comps are silly, because Cam Chancellor would have had a Hall of Fame career if not for the fact that injuries slowed him down. Just one of the best strong safeties to ever play the game. But I get it, because you take the size, you take the speed, you take the instincts. It's all there. It's a punisher. That's that guy who can play in the box for you too. Now, I will say that there's times where he can struggle to get off blocks, but that's true for a lot of college players. True for a lot of college safeties, especially. So that's something to work on, is moving away from those blocks. I had a word in my head and it just went away from me. But all of the skills are there. All of the skills are there for him to be effective in coverage, effective against the run game. I could see him being an outstanding blitzer because of that speed and his timing. This was such a massive upgrade to the Seahawks secondary. I was surprised they didn't attack secondary a little bit more, didn't get a corner. Now, they did sign arguably the best undrafted player in Zy Alexander, but Nick Emmanwori is a huge upgrade to their safety position. I don't know if he starts right away, but you're going to see him play. You're going to see him play a lot. And I won't be shocked at all if he usurps Bryant pretty early. He's that kind of talent. I thought he was one of the top 20 players in the draft. So to get him at 35, and I was shocked by some of the teams that passed on him. Like, for instance, I like Malachi Starks. I will take Emmanwori over him every day of the week. And that's not an insult to Starks. And maybe the Ravens feel like Starks is a better fit that allows Kyle Hamilton to play a more comfortable version of his role. We're not talking about the Ravens. We're talking about the Seahawks. I just love this pick. I was smiling. 3 picks made me smile like that. I was happy with the Zabel pick and thought it was great value and all of that stuff, like I talked about. But 3 picks made me just do a little bit of a fist pump. We'll talk about when we get there. This next guy didn't make me fist pump, but boy, oh boy, did I absolutely understand why they took him at 50. So everyone talked about the offensive line being a need for the Seahawks, and they were absolutely not wrong. But the 2 places I thought the Seahawks needed to upgrade outside of offensive line that weren't being talked about nearly enough were safety and at tight end. And they got a really good one at pick 50. I think Elijah Arroyo is excellent value. If not for injury concerns, I think this guy's easily a first-round pick. Now, the concerns are pretty obvious. He played in like 11 games in 2022 and 2023 with knee injuries, and knee injuries are scary, very scary. They are not only important for a football player, obvious point is obvious, they have a tendency to come back. You're never really safe from a knee injury, kind of like a pitcher is never really safe from an elbow injury. That's something that you're going to have to keep an eye on, but all of the talent is here to be a upper class tight end. He's not a great route runner, but tight ends don't have to be great route runners. If you have a Travis Kelce who can make defenders shake, then great. But he doesn't have to be that. What he has to do is he has to have good hands, which he definitely has. He has to have the ability to go over the middle without fear. He definitely has that. Has to have soft, competent hands. He has that and then some. He's really a big wide receiver who is willing to block. Now, he's not a great blocker yet because, of course, he's not. Most tight ends Every once in a while, you get one who is a Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech, but those guys aren't great receivers. The combination of willingness to block and the fact that he's an athletic tight end who can be a red zone threat, who can be that threat over the middle as well to help take the pressure off some of these wide receivers. That's excellent value. And look, AJ Barner's a solid player. I think he's going to be a very good number 2 tight end. And Noah Fant has had his moments. But Elijah Arroyo profiles better than Noah Fant now. Now, look, Noah Fant was I think like the 13th pick of his draft. It just didn't work out. And we'll see if it works out with Arroyo. But you needed to upgrade there. Or at the very least, you needed somebody in 12 sets where you have the 2 tight ends. You needed somebody with a little bit more athleticism and reason to be cognizant of the other tight end than Barner. All due respect. And I won't be shocked next year if it's Barner and Arroyo playing in those 12 tight ends. I think Noah Fant is a cap casualty. But there is huge upside. And look, Noah Fant's only here for 1 year. I know I said and look a bunch of times in that one. But Elijah Arroyo has a chance to be a very, very strong part of the Seahawks offense, not just in the future, but this year as well. So let's talk about the one pick that gave me a little bit of pause. At 92, the Seattle Seahawks take Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama. And I promise you, this is not just me being mad at Kalen DeBoer. I am not a Jalen Milroe fan. I have watched this guy play over the last 2 years quite a bit. And while he has improved in certain areas, and there is no denying that his athleticism is special. I have my doubts he'll ever be accurate enough to be a starting quarterback. And if I am taking a quarterback in the 3rd round, this is just me. A lot of people disagree with this. I want a player in the 3rd round to be able to develop into a starter. And I just think the accuracy issues are too much. Now, having said that, I get it. Because he's someone you can play right away in certain gadgets. Gadget seems like a mean term for it, but he is someone you can put into packages. There you go. There's the nice way to say it. He is someone you can put on the field because of his speed and his shake that he can make plays. Now, I personally think Shedeur Sanders is a much better quarterback prospect than Jalen Milroe. I think that you could argue there's a couple of guys who went on day 3 who compete with him. But there's no denying that in terms of making a potential impact with his legs, he clobbers all those guys. He clobbers even Riley Leonard, who, as a Notre Dame fan, I grew a little bit of a affinity for, but would acknowledge that in the 3rd round would be a horrible draft pick. I would have preferred to see them attack wide receiver, but we'll talk about that in a second. I get it. I don't love Milroe. I won't be shocked at all if this guy doesn't have a long NFL career. I hope I'm wrong. It'd be great if he developed into the Seahawks starter. It'd be awesome. The accuracy is just so inconsistent, and man, watching him in the Senior Bowl especially, it's tough. And watching him against Michigan in that bowl game and watching some other games as well. Alabama had the talent to be a playoff team and then some. And Jalen Milroe's a big reason why they didn't get there. But I do get it. The athleticism is there for him to be a really fun player, and I hope it works out because he's a Seahawk and he seems like a good dude too. But I definitely have my questions. This next pick is one of the fist pump ones. And I lied because there's 4, because we've done one with Eamon Worry and we've got another one coming. So the Seahawks trade Sam Howell for they trade a fifth and Sam Howell, a much lower fifth, to the Vikings to get a fifth round pick. Sam Howell, thanks for your service. You were terrible. And it won't shock me if he develops into a nice backup, but talk about accuracy issues and without nearly the athleticism of a Milroe to get away with it. But they go up in the draft and they get rid of their fourth quarterback now, and they go get Riley Mills out of Notre Dame. Now, look, I am a Notre Dame fan. I am a apologist for the organization sometimes, for the school sometimes, because I think people sometimes hate Notre Dame for no real good reason. It's just fun to hate on things. But it's allowed me to watch a lot of Riley Mills. And while I admit a bias towards him, I also acknowledge that he is unbelievably good value in the fifth round. The thing about Riley Mills is he gives them that defensive lineman versatility that they really don't have. They have guys who are good on the edge. They have guys who are good on the middle. And Riley Mills maybe not be as good as any of those guys who are projected to be starters. But what Mills can do is he can play any of those defensive positions. Probably can't be a zero, not somebody you're lining up directly in front of the center, but he can play in the interior. He can play on the outside. 7.5 sacks last year and a ton of pressures. He was a massive reason for Notre Dame's success. And he's a tough kid. He's a good kid. I love this pick. I love just the depth that he gives the Seahawks. That guy you can bring in for basically anybody on the roster. Yeah, we're going to have Riley Mills play quarterback. Anyone on that defensive line and give you success. He's going to have a long NFL career, and I just loved this pick. But this next pick might be my favorite they made, partially just because of value. The guy I wanted the Seahawks to take in 92, and this was something I talked about in my NBC Sports Slack. I wanted Torrey Horton with pick 92. So to get him with pick, I think it was 172, just potentially the steal of the draft. Torrey Horton is a baller. He's someone I've watched at Colorado State for a long time and been nothing but impressed. And if he doesn't suffer the injury, we're talking about Torrey Horton being a top 2 round selection. But the injury happens. And he runs a 4.41 in the combine that reminds you of the athleticism. But I heard his workouts were even better. So I was shocked that he stayed on the board for as long as he did. Part of that is because this wide receiver class was so deep. I think 32 ended up being drafted. Another one from the Seahawks that was drafted that I really, really like. Torrey Horton is exactly what the Seahawks should have been looking for. That 6'3" size, that ability to take the top off of the defense, but also a guy who will be good in crossing routes, will be good in that vicinity over the middle of the field. It's not a great route runner, but his athleticism, I think, is going to more than make up for it. And I think right now that's a starting wide receiver for the Seahawks. Now, we'll see how he does in camp, right? But you take a look and you have your Cooper Kupp, you have your JSN, and you have your Torrey Horton. And I think that works out beautifully. I love the Seahawks wide receiver room now. With Montrez Valdes-Scantling, as a fourth. Yep. Sign me up. And another guy who I think will compete for time. We'll talk about it. I promise we'll talk about it. This was such a great pick. Such unbelievable value to get him in the 5th round. And I get it. There were some really good wide receivers in this draft. There was no Marvin Harrison Jr. or anything like that, but there were a lot of guys who made sense in pick 20 to pick 60. And I think Torrey Horton was one of those guys. So to get him in the 5th, even if you say top 75, if you want to be safer, yeah, that's still unbelievable value. I loved this pick. The next pick was a bit of a head scratcher for me, and then I kind of understood it. It's another Alabama guy. Um, Robbie Oots, I think that's how you pronounce it. If it's not, it's fine. That's a fullback. And when they drafted him as a tight end, I remember, I saw this guy catch a couple of passes for Alabama, but I don't remember much. And I don't remember hearing much talk about him as a relatively early day 3 pick, mid day 3 pick, I guess. But that's just the perfect build for that fullback. 6'4, 270. They want to play with the fullback. They want to pound the football. They want to run the football down your throat. And this guy can do that. Help you do that, excuse me. Not by running it, but by being that lead blocker. And he has good enough hands that he can move, put in motion, play in line. It wasn't my favorite pick by any means. And I was really confused at first. But late 5th, you start to go, okay, these are where you take your guys, the guys that you have an affinity towards. It's a little weird, but I get it. It seems like the type of guy you also could have gotten as a UDFA. But they want a fullback. They probably thought he was the best fit at fullback in this entire draft. So they make sure they get it. It does make some sense. Bryce Cabledew is another pick that I really liked. And I thought he was someone they might target a little earlier. But this was also a pretty good guard draft, and he slips to them. And it's a nice pick. This is a guy at Kansas who I believe was a 4-year starter, really quick off the football. And I think that's something the Seahawks have been missing a little bit. Now, it's important to have that strength to be that mauler. But at the same time, being quick off the football and generating that block, being the first to the punch, that's important too. And that's what Cabledew does. He gets to that defensive line. Now, does he have the same strength as some of these other guards? I don't think so. Is he going to be someone who maybe struggles a little bit in pass pro, especially to start? Yeah, I think so. But I can see him developing into a starter. Not a great starter, but a starter. And I could also see him being a guy who has versatility, that you would give a look at snapping the football because of his quickness off the football. This is solid value in the 5th round. And I also just love how many offensive linemen they took. They didn't reach for anybody, but they're putting guys at the position and giving them a chance to develop. We'll see how the development works, but it's not a bad thing to have some quantity. You want quality, of course, but it's not a bad thing to have some quantity. And they definitely addressed quantity with that selection. Speaking of quantity, Damian Martinez in the 7th round is unbelievably good value. This was a good running back class too, but I kept looking up. There were 2 players I kept saying, why is this guy not coming off the board? It was Taj Brooks and it was Damian Martinez. And Brooks ends up going 193, I believe. I can't believe I remember that. That's really weird. Goes to the Bengals. And the Seahawks get Martinez around later. Man, I think Damian Martinez can be a really nice NFL running back. Good power, good size, a good catcher of the football, which, the Seahawks don't have bad receiving backs, but they don't have a great one. I think, with all due respect to maybe Kenny McIntosh, he might be the best receiver in that room now. And you're going to need 4 running backs. And all due respect to George Holani, I don't think I want that guy being my 4th. I'd like to have him on the practice squad. I think Damian Martinez is much more talented than both McIntosh and Holani. And I like Kenny McIntosh. I hope they find a way to get him the football. But if they're going to play the way that we think they're going to play, they need running back depth and then some. And look, do you trust Kenneth Walker to play 17 games? I don't trust any running back to play 17 games. Same with Charbonnet. So you needed that depth. And you got a guy who was a top 100 prospect for me, right in that range anyway, at 225 or something like that. That's just unbelievably good value. I didn't quite fist pump with that one, but I did kind of shake my head and go, yeah, that's a really nice pick. Mason Richmond, you take an Iowa offensive lineman, he's going to play for a long time. That's just the way it works. Good swing tackle project. A type that will compete with Mike Jarrell for a roster spot. Um, Good size. I think he's 6'6". Nothing flashy, but he gets the job. He got the job done in college. I don't know if he's athletic enough to do it in the NFL, but you give it a look. And Iowa offensive linemen do have a chance to play a long time in this league. There's no denying it. If you went to Iowa and you played tight end or offensive line, you tend to stick around for a little while. All right, the final pick. It wasn't my favorite, but it was another fist pump because I just have I don't know what even the right word is. I have loved watching Ricky White play for the last couple of years very, very much. And I absolutely gave a fist pump for this one as well. I'm stunned that Ricky White landed with Seattle. And I thought he was going to go undrafted because he didn't test great. And there was so much wide receiver depth in this draft. But I love that Seattle gave it a shot. He was so productive at UNLV, and he just finds a seam. And this was also Ricky White was the best offensive player on UNLV, especially 2 years ago, where he was getting doubled all the time, and he still found a way to get open. He just has those instincts, and he's going to be a special teams star. He blocked 4 punts last year. He has that length that is going to give trouble, but he's going to be a really good coverage guy too. I loved this pick. I love this pick. Is he going to be an NFL star? Almost assuredly not. But I think he's going to stick on rosters for a really long time. A really long time. And he's going to be somebody who makes an immediate contribution, I think, because of his special teams ability. This was a really good draft. This was my favorite Seahawks draft in so long. And again, if you want to say they got to play Chris Crawford, great. You're not wrong. But I watched a lot of these guys, and I wanted so many of these guys to be Seahawks. So many of these guys to be Seahawks. And they got a bunch of them. I don't think they passed on the guys they passed on, they ended up getting. That's the crazy part. The guys that, oh man, can you really pass on a safety like Eamon Worry? Yeah, because you get him at 35. Can you pass on a wide receiver like Torrey Horton? Yeah, because you get him in the 5th. Oh, I love this class so much. And at the very least, even if all of these guys flame out, the process was my favorite Seahawks process in a long time. I think Seahawk fans should be excited about this. Please let me know what you think. What was your favorite pick? What was your least favorite pick? I'm just thrilled with this class, and I was so excited to record this video. I thought about doing it late last night, but figured I should wait. Please hit like, please hit subscribe. Really appreciate the support. It's a really good draft.